Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a video talking about my worst books of 2024 list. I don't love doing these, but being a reviewer means I'm being honest. Now, I view my job as to promote books that I love, and so I talk about books I love a lot. But sometimes you have to talk about the bad. So today I'm going to talk about the 8 books that were on my worst of the year for 2024. Now, I realize some of these books might have some huge fans, so if you loved any of these books, great, good for you, and I understand some people find enjoyment from these books. I just did not. And so I looked at my Goodreads and said, which are the books that I gave 1 or 2 stars to? And I had 8 in that category. And then I thought, what about the books that I gave 3 stars to? Because sometimes I give a book 3 stars, then after like a couple months, I'm like, I should have given that 2 stars. And I looked and I had 23 star books, which is actually quite a lot for me. And I thought, you know what? All of these deserve to be 3 out of 5 because at least there is some enjoyment from them. Most of them were meh. I didn't love them, but there's stuff that I liked about them. These 8 I would categorize as I disliked. Like on the category of liking to disliking, I disliked these books. So, just that's why these are the books on the list. But there's other books that I was underwhelmed by or I was disappointed by. If this was a disappointed list of books I was most disappointed by, the 3-star books would be everywhere on this list. But I'm talking about what for me was the worst. And again, if you liked any of these books, I understand. So this is my list. Let's start with my number 8 worst book of the year, and that is Bleachers by John Grisham. I know I'm taking one of my top favorite authors of all time and giving him one of the worst books of the year. Yeah, Bleachers was not a good book. I did this book really quickly. It's a really short book. It takes no time at all. And there's no plot to this. This is John Grisham just wanting to talk about football because he likes football. And he's trying to throw in some of his quintessential John Grisham-ish storytelling tropes, and they all fell flat. I read another John Grisham book about football that was Playing for Pizza, which was a great book. So I know he can do this type of thing well, but this time it was not well done, and I was very disappointed in this book. And, there's other books this year of John Grisham that I loved and were top-tier books, so he's still a top-tier author for me, but this is the one time he wrote a book that I specifically did not enjoy at all. And I'm really thankful for how short it was, because it meant I didn't have to read that much of it. Let's talk about my number 7 worst book of the year, and that is going to be Life, the Universe, and Everything by Douglas Adams. This is the 3rd book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I loved the first book, and I thought book 2 was fine, and I read those both last year. And then this year, I started off early in the year with Life, the Universe, and Everything, and I was like, why does this book exist? It feels so pointless, and I get it's nihilism. That's what it's supposed to be. No, books are supposed to be enjoyable. That's the whole point of books, fiction at least. If you're going to write nonfiction, I understand nonfiction is there for information, but fiction is meant to be enjoyed, and this nihilistic storytelling style is just not enjoyable to me. The jokes didn't land here. And, I understand this series is not meant to pay off stuff, but I loved So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, the book that comes after this. I thought that was a fantastic book, one of my favorite in the series. So I know that Douglas Adams can write entertaining stories, but this one, I was like, why did I read this? This was such a waste of my time. Did not like it. So that's why it's my number 7 on my list. My number 6 I know is going to make a lot of people disappointed because a lot of people love this series, and I'm just not one of them. And that is Stephen Erickson's Deadhouse Gates, the 2nd book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. I understand why people love this series. I love some big epic fantasy that's huge with a huge amount of characters and huge plot lines and deep themes and all this stuff. This book just did not work. I read the whole book. I powered through. I was going to make a video with my friend Caleb from Caleb Likes Books. We wanted to buddy read this together, and he actually was the one that initiated it, saying, hey, I'm going to be reading this book. And I was like, well, I have it on my shelves. I may as well get around to it. And I didn't like book 1, but I was willing to give book 2 a chance, and a lot of people said this is a massive step up from book 1. So I was like, great, I'm so excited. If it's a massive step up, great. Maybe I'll get into the series. And I went in open-minded, and I didn't like the book. I didn't like the book. I didn't care for it at all. None of the characters resonated really with me. Some of them, like, I started to resonate with them, and then just, like, he wrote stuff about them, and I was like, are you serious? That's where you're going. And the plot line was never engaging, and I had trouble keeping up with everything. And some people say, you have to read to the end to make it worth it. And I'm like, no. Even The Wheel of Time, which is huge and is convoluted and has a lot of character stuff, I still loved the early part of The Wheel of Time, and even the later parts of it. So at least I was hooked towards the beginning. I never got hooked with the Malazan series. And so that's why this is my number 6 worst book of the year. Very sad. Very sad I didn't like this, because I wanted to like this series. I have no plans to continue on with the Malazan series. I feel like it would be a disservice to just keep negative reviewing all the time for the series. And I also believe that it's not good to eat up my time with these 1,000-page tomes that I'm not enjoying. Read something I'm going to enjoy probably. So that's why I'm not saying I will never, ever read the series. Maybe one day in the future, 10, 15 years from now, I'll retry Malazan. It'll be a favorite. But for right now, no. My number 5 worst book of the year is a Star Trek book. Is the only Star Trek book on this list, and that is Star Trek: The Lost Era, The Well of Souls by Ilsa J. Bick. This is for a Star Trek book, this is a long book. The longest book I read this year was, that was a bad book, was Stephen Erickson's Deadhouse Gates. But this book for Star Trek, for instance, most Star Trek books like 200 to 300 pages and have really large font. This book is about 450 pages with the tiniest font I've seen in Star Trek books. It's so tiny. And so it's a decent amount for a Star Trek book, but I was like, maybe she's fitting in all this awesome story. And none of the characters were likable. None of the plot lines truly resonated by the end. She sets up a fantastic opening in this book that is completely not paid off. And I was just so frustrated by what happened. She turned a character that a lot of people liked, like Garrett, Captain Garrett, into the most unlikable character I've read in a book for Star Trek. So unlikable. Like, not in like the, I hate you and you're well written. It's like, no, why did you do this to this character? This makes no sense. This is so bad. So I did not like this book at all. And that's why it's my 5th worst book of the year. My 4th book, worst book of the year, is a novelization by Terry Brooks, and that is Hook. Again, it's a really short read, so it's not like it's, it was a huge investment on my time. But novelizations, to work, they need to add a lot to the story. Don't just regurgitate the movie. Add a lot of context, add a lot of new scenes, add a lot of inner character, inner dialogue, and inner thoughts, and really flesh out the story. That's what a novelization's meant to do. It's not just to put the words on the page from the movie. And yet, Terry Brooks didn't do that. Now, I know that Terry Brooks had a bad experience with this movie. I've read his Sometimes the Magic Works, where he goes in depth on this. I understand the bad experience. He still could have done a lot more. And I know he could do more and just doesn't, because I've also read his Star Wars novelization of The Phantom Menace, and I don't think he did a good job with that either. And I was just like, why did I read this? I read it to be a completionist for Terry Brooks, because I'm a huge Terry Brooks fan. I've read the entire Shanora series. I've read the entire Magic Kingdom of Landover series. I plan to read his other series eventually, but I needed to also read his other books. So that is why this book is my number 4 worst book of the year. Just so pointless. And it took out the joy of by the way, it wasn't just that it didn't add anything. There is no joy in this book. The happiness in the movie is not properly conveyed. The whimsy of the movie is not properly conveyed. He cuts all the songs that are in the movie, which is a huge disservice to the book, in my opinion. So it just didn't work. Now we're at my number 3 worst book of the year, and this was the only new release on the list, which I'm really glad that I liked most of the new releases I read this year. Some of them were duds, but most of them I enjoyed, but there was one that I thought was just not good, and it's really painful to say. I kind of expected it, though, and I gave it a shot. I was like, maybe it's going to be good, and there is one good thing about this book, but it wasn't enough to save the book. And my number 3 worst book of the year was Mace Windu: The Glass Abyss by Stephen Barnes. Now, I read a Clone Wars novel from Stephen Barnes that came out 20 years ago in 2004, and I didn't like it at all. And he went to weird sci-fi, creature sci-fi, which creature sci-fi has never been the sci-fi for me. I do like I like hard sci-fi, I like the space exploration stuff. I like space opera with the political stories. I even enjoy some of the comedic sci-fi, like, some of the Hitchhiker's books. But creature sci-fi has never worked for me, and it does not work in Star Wars. I know why he went the direction he did in this book, and I understand what he was going for, but it just doesn't fit at all. And the villain of the book I thought was pretty awesome, but other than that, this whole book just felt so un-Star Warsy. Ironically, this is not the worst Star Wars book I read this year, so brace yourselves, there's an even worse one. But this book, it just doesn't feel like Star Wars, and it feels like Stephen Barnes had what he wanted to do with an original science fiction novel. He was given the opportunity to write a Star Wars book, and so he was like, hey, I will write this original science fiction novel, put Mace Windu in it. Mace Windu does not feel like Mace Windu in this book. He kind of feels more bland, and it's like it could have been an original Jedi. If this had been an original Jedi, the book would have been so much better, but he just doesn't feel like Mace Windu in this book. And so many other choices were just bizarre. And there's not a lot of the touchstones of Star Wars in this book. You see Coruscant briefly in Naboo in the first chapter, and then at the very end, he meets up with Yoda again. But that's like it. There's 2 chapters out of 40 in the book. The rest of the book is just not entertaining and just did not work. So I was sad to say this is my number 3 worst book of the year. Number 2 worst book of the year for me was Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is one of the few times where I bought a whole trilogy, and I'm not going to finish this trilogy. I saw these books for really cheap at my local bookstore. They're mass market paperbacks. So I was like, ooh, I'll get into this series. And I read the first book in January, and it was just such a downer of a dud for me. There are touchstones of what should have worked for the book, the kind of academy-like sequences, the fantasy world and stuff. The main character never connected with me. The academy storyline never connected with me. The plot never connected with me. The grimness of a book. If you're going to write a grimdark book, it has to have stellar other components like great political storylines or great character interplays, and just none of that worked in this book. Just none of it worked. And I was like, this is just such a frustration. And I just realized there's nothing holding me and making me think maybe I should try other books in this series. Some other series that I didn't love the first book, but I was like, you know what? There's some things I'm really interested in. Maybe more books in the series I'll love. There's nothing saying I need to read the other books, so I don't even think I'm ever going to get to them. So that is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. Didn't like it. My number 2 worst book of the year. But none of these can compare with the worst book of the year. None of these hold a candle for how bad compared to the first book of the year. And I'm usually very nice and respectful, and I will continue to try to be. And I actually enjoy other books by this author. But man, was this author the wrong person to write a book in Star Wars. And that is the Star Wars novel The Crystal Star by Vonda M. McIntyre. There is a history behind this book. There is a reason this book is hated so much by the Star Wars fandom. And that is because it does not feel like a Star Wars book. The decision-making is bizarre. The logical points made in this book are bizarre. The characters feel totally out of place. The world-building feels like a Star Trek novel. A lot of the character choices seem like character choices made in Star Trek. None of the characters really feel like they would be doing things the characters would do. Leia, what was going on with her, with the stuff with the kids in this book? The best part about this book was the kids, but no, not worth saving the book. This is the one star, just pure, I just said this is a 1 star. This is a bad book. And I like to be respectful, and Vonda McIntyre wrote some Star Trek books that I love. Her novelization of The Wrath of Khan is pretty good. Her novelization of The Search for Spock is amazing. Amazing book. And the majority of that book is, not majority, but a high amount of that book is an original story. And she did an incredible job with that. And she's written original Star Trek novels as well that are great. But Star Wars was not the right fit for her. And I think they said, we need a bunch of Star Wars writers for all these novels we've contracted. Vonda knows media tie-in fiction. She knows science fiction. Give her a Star Wars book. Was the wrong move. A big mistake on Bantam's part. And just does not work at all. And so that is my worst book of the year. And I am So glad I got it over with, because I plan to read all the Star Wars books. That means I have to read even the bad ones. And yeah, this one has earned its reputation. It is certainly the worst Star Wars expanded universe novel I have read. Now, there are some pretty bad novels in the canon. I don't think any of them is as bad as this one. And there's also a Star Wars novel that I absolutely detested. That was Ronin. Could not stand that book at all. I think that book is like on the level. So one of them is the worst book in Star Wars. But I did not like this book. So those are the worst books of the year. I don't love to be mean or, so negative all the time, but sometimes you gotta be honest, and no, this stuff didn't work. So those are my worst books of the year. If you've read any of them, do you agree with me? Do you like these books? I'm probably going to get a lot of Malazan disappointment here. But let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.